Thank you to those who are joining. We're just going to wait a few more minutes until we have some more people, and we'll get started shortly. Good evening, everyone. I'm Amy Kerwin. I'm the Artistic Director of Southampton Art Center. Thank you all for joining us this evening for another sure to be fascinating and enjoyable conversation with some of the artists of 2020 Vision, as well as Bernard Lumpkin, who's a collector and a essayist for the show as well. So I just, again, want to thank our partners at New York Academy of Art for putting on this show with us, along with Stephanie Roach, David Kratz, the curator, Stephanie Roach, the co-curator, and Gilbey Keller, the editor. It's been a wonderful experience. We love working with New York Academy of Art, and the show is on view through December 27th. So you have plenty of time to come see it many, many times. Galleries are open Thursday to Sunday, 12 to 5 p.m. So please do come visit us, and save the date for November 12th at 6 p.m. Eastern for the next panel discussion, which is Documenting Crises in Real Time, moderated by Clifford Owens with Steve Mumford and Pamela Zeibel, and Clifford as well. And so that's going to be another great evening. So please do save the date for November 12th at 6 p.m. Eastern. I will be moderating, I will be keeping track of the Q&A and the chat fields. So if you have questions, please ask them. And we'll take those questions at the end, as many as we can get to. We apologize to those we don't get to, but we'll do our best. So that's enough for me. Do check out southamptonartcenter.org and come see us. And now I'm going to bring in New York Academy of Art President David Kratz. David.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Amy. One thing Amy didn't note is that I am also an alum of the New York Academy of Art. So I know the school super well. And just briefly, the New York Academy of Art is a graduate school down in Tribeca. We study painting, drawing, and sculpture. And our mission is to give artists the skills and techniques that they need to make vital contemporary art. The school is focused mostly on figurative art, in the belief that everything you need to know, you can learn by study of the body and of representing the body, and then you can take that and do anything you want with it as you go forward. And one of the great things about figurative art is that it often is used to tell the stories of our times, and that is a perfect sort of lead into this show, 2020 Vision. First, I'll say 2020 Vision is our third collaboration with the Southampton Art Center. And I just want to give a big shout out and thank you to them. They really make dreams come true. And we have had so much fun, and it's been so kind of richly rewarding experience working with them. My co-curator, Stephanie Roach, and I had a mission here to put together a show that responded to the times. And mostly it was about the two events that happened during 2020 that sort of took everybody by surprise and completely rocked our world. Obviously the coronavirus pandemic and the social justice awakening. And we had a really great time kind of mining each of our respective networks to find artists who would be witnesses and antenna of how these events were changing the world and how they were responding to these times. One of the great things about the show is that in addition to visual artists, we included text pieces, so written pieces, and having artists and writers together. Here's an example on the screen right now. We used poll quotes from the written pieces. They're all taken from much longer pieces of writing or poetry or various things to interplay with the images in order that we would end up with a multifaceted view of the situation. Now it gives me a lot of pleasure to introduce my co-curator, Stephanie Roach, who is also a dear friend, and she is the director of the Flag Art Foundation. Stephanie.
Thank you, David. I'm Stephanie Roach, the director of the Flag Art Foundation, where I am currently seated. And we just opened a show of Awal Irisku, and it will be on view through mid-November. I just want to say that in addition to what David had said about 2020 vision, one of the most rewarding and meaningful parts of this whole process was working very closely with the artists. And like many of us, I mean, we were all in quarantine, as were they. So the communications that we had with the artists during this time, the planning process was really important. And I want to give a brief introduction to the three artists that we're going to be hearing from tonight before I hand it back over to David to introduce Bernard. One of the commonalities that I saw with these three artists that I think is pretty striking is that they are all self-taught. And I think that will inform a very interesting conversation with Bernard. So Tawny Chatmon is an artist that primarily works with digitally altered photographic portraits. And so she primarily worked in photograph, but then had started to move toward combining traditional portraiture with digital collage, layering elements of antique patterns, vintage botanicals, and wildlife illustrations. And in the work that she has in our current show, Eden's Play Dress, this has layers of gold leaf and paint inspired by Klimt. She won first place in 2018 in the International Photo Awards for The Awakening, and she had a solo exhibition in 2019 at Photografska in New York. Taha Clayton, he is based in Brooklyn, and he, I think this sums up his work quite well. He brings together social and political issues, spiritual virtues, and above all, the portraits are painted with a universal love that is seen through his technical abilities and poetic compositions. So we'll be hearing more about that. And then Justin Wadlington, who I actually met through the founder of Flag, Glenn Furman, and we included him in an exhibition in 2019 called Drawn Together and featured his work. And over the past few years, we've really gotten to know each other. Justin is blind in one eye, which makes his story really compelling. And he also, he's a painter and a draftsman. He works in a more photorealistic style, and he has portrayed different icons such as Jay-Z, Nas, Notorious B.I.G., and Eazy-E, as well as different art historical references. And I just want to draw the relationship back to the Academy, because actually in the show that Justin was featured, we had an open call with the New York Academy of Art, which made it a really special occasion. So I'll turn it back over to David, who will introduce Bernard. David, you're muted.
Thank you. I just want to say I miss seeing you on a daily basis when we were working together to put this show on, and it really exceeded my expectations. And it's great to see you on at least virtually right now. You know, one of the greatest things about doing a show like this is the people that it brings you into contact with. And one of my favorites in this particular case has been our moderator, Bernard Lumpkin. And before I turn it over to him for the rest of the panel, I want to tell you why he was exactly the right choice to moderate this panel. He's a art collector, a patron, an educator, a curator, and he focuses on emerging and established artists of African descent as part of a broader mission of institutional advocacy and support. He's on the board of trustees at the Studio Museum. He's on the board of trustees at the Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture. He's on a couple important committees at some little known institutions like the Museum of Modern Art and the Whitney. And as if all of that wasn't enough, he put together an incredible show that is, I believe, still currently traveling, based on he and his husband's family collection. It's called Young, Gifted, and Black. And it's, I just see that the book just came out, and it's really a beautiful, important show. But most importantly of all, he's a contributing artist to this show. Bernard did a great essay, one of my favorites, in fact, that sort of offered three perspectives on life in lockdown. One dealing with his children, two dealing with the artists that he's in daily contact with, and three centering on the protests. And the way he knitted them all together was really beautiful. I encourage you to read it. And with that, Bernard, I'd love to turn it over to you. Take it away.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
We can.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, David, for those kind words. You know, I just need to say how grateful I am to have been part of the magic of this project. I mean, really, when David first called me, quickly, just to say a few words, when David first called me, he was exactly, as he explained in his introductory remarks, it was the beginning of the pandemic, and the show was taking shape. And then over the course of our conversation, George Floyd happened, and we were dealing with a whole different set of, a whole different reality, and actually a reality which became another opportunity for this exhibition, which I think David and Stephanie shepherded with so much grace and so much thoughtfulness. And all I can say is I'm a lot of gratitude for thinking of including me, for giving me an opportunity to reflect on these issues, as many of us in the art world have. You know, I can't describe how amazing it was for me to see my words on the wall next to some of my favorite artists when I went to the Southampton Art Center for the opening of the exhibition, which was also a first in terms of my first sort of post-pandemic re-entry into the art world. So that was really amazing to reconnect with artists, to see work in person again. It really was inspiring. You know, some of the artists that I recognized in the exhibition were artists that I already knew very well, but I also got the pleasure of sharing wall space with some new artists. And as someone who focuses on emerging artists and new voices, Young, Gifted, and Black is the name of the book. For me, it was really special to learn about, to discover, and to tonight share the stage with three other artists from the exhibition whose work I was not previously very familiar with. And so I'm also just expressing gratitude for giving me the opportunity to continue to learn and to grow and to challenge myself in this period. So just a big thank you. And I think as Stephanie said so well, that this show, what's amazing about it is that it really is, I think, Stephanie, you said this in another panel, a live document of the period. And, you know, we're still in that period. And so the document, which is this exhibition, is still living. And I think Tawny and Taha and Justin are really privileged to share with us this evening their perspective, speaking to, responding to the times that we are living through, and as all artists do, showing us the way forward, showing us the future before we even know what we're looking at. So again, a big thank you, and I will now turn to the artists in question. I'll start with you, Tawny. So, I'm going to say for each of you, and I wish I had more time, and I would if I could, but for each of you, I'd like to say, something that I responded to in the work that really struck me or touched me, and then ask you a question about the work too. So what I really loved about your photography, which is really interesting because it's photography and then so much more, but starting first as a photographer, there's something very personal and also universal in your work. And your photographs are drawn from portraits of people your family, your children. And I think, when you're talking about, when you have a photograph of a child, a Black child, you're talking about your own family, but you're also talking about all Black children. And for someone looking at your photographs like myself, you're giving us an opportunity to see ourselves in your work. And I thought that was very powerful. So that balance between the personal and the universal. As Stephanie pointed out just now in her introduction, a really amazing thing that you do with these photographs is that you embellish them and you add elements, collage-like, whether it's paint, whether it's gold leaf. And I was wondering if you would just share with us a little more about that process, sort of starting with the photograph and then what you do to take that photograph to a different place through your work.
Okay, so I don't know if we wanted to talk about the photo we're on or move to another so that we can
maybe Eden's play
yeah,
like Eden's play dress in the exhibition.
Okay,
wonderful.
Yeah. So Eden's play dress is from my series The Redemption, and this started as a photograph, and this series is my response to constantly hearing of beautiful Black children being sent home from school because of their hairstyles and their natural hair. These are natural hairstyles that we wear in Black culture, and kids are constantly being discriminated against in the school systems and unable to wear their hair in these styles. And so I started off with a portrait of Eden. And from that portrait, I brought it into Photoshop and I photographed her in a white dress. And so I wanted to be able to paint her dress on my own. So I took that dress out in Photoshop, and then I, after having it printed, I was able to paint in gold leaf and add all of the additional touches once the piece was printed.
Is the paint and the gold leaf, I mean, there's been a reference to the work, which is to Gustav Klimt, I think familiar to many viewers. Were you sort of thinking about a specific, aside from Klimt and European painting tradition, were you thinking of other traditions perhaps, or?
For me, of course, gold historically through art was reserved for people of importance. In religious iconography and Byzantine art. In Klimt, of course, I definitely wanted the connection to be made immediately. The feeling that his work gave me when I first laid eyes on it was definitely the same feeling that I wanted to evoke in the viewer of my work.
That's great. That's great. Can we look at another, maybe another image? Okay, The Redemption, St. Michael George III.
Yeah.
Beautiful, would you still call them collages? Is that what you would say? Or a photograph with?
Honestly, I call them messages. I really don't even know what to refer to the work as. A lot of the work, and while I'm working, I am thinking of someone, something that has happened that has forced me to do the work. And And basically, when I'm unable to say what I want to say, I'm able to do this through my work. And so this piece, it's titled St. Michael George Trey, is really what the 3 stands for, but the third is dedicated to 3 boys. And before the work belonged in a collection, I didn't really mention the inspiration behind the work, but there are so many different layers. His eyes, I have used the eyes of George Stinney, who is the youngest person to be executed in the United States. He was a 14-year-old boy. He was wrongfully accused. So those are his eyes that I've used on my nephew. And Michael is in reference to Mike Brown, and Trey is for Trayvon Martin. And so, yeah, there's so many different messages and so many different meanings embedded in the work.
That's great. That's great. And I guess, Tawny, would you like to say anything in terms of the sort of the way you feel sort of being a part of this exhibition, I guess I would say, and maybe with reference to Justin or Taha's work, in terms of, how you see your work in this moment in an exhibition talking about these issues and in dialogue with other artists? What does that mean to you? Like, how do you see that?
The thing is, I think that our work will always be relevant. A lot of the time, people use the word that it's relevant right now, but it's always relevant. I think that we're saying similar things throughout our work. And Eden's Play Dress was created in 2019, before the exhibition. But it still has relevance, and it will, because through COVID and through everything that's happened, so much has been revealed still. I believe that majority of the teenagers and children that have been killed by COVID have been Black and Hispanic. So it reveals so much that racism and discrimination exists. And to me, that's what COVID has also done.
Great. Okay, Tawny, thank you. So hold some of those thoughts for the end when we'll sort of have more of a group conversation.
Okay.
Thank you so much for that. I was hoping now to turn it to Taha, and if Taha is there, I don't see you, but okay. Let's see. I'm just looking to see if Taha, you're coming up. I don't see. Hey, there you are.
Hey.
Good to see you, Taha.
Great to see you.
Okay. Beautiful. Eco-spirituality. What a great title. Okay. So from photography to with Tawny to photorealism, which I think is such an amazing genre of art, and it sort of speaks for itself. We're talking about paintings that have a certain sort of verisimilitude that mimics that of photographs. It may also hint at the process of your work, which I'm going to ask you about. Do you start with photographs? Do you reference photographs? And then I also, another thing that I really was drawn to in the work is just the sort of layering here, which happens. And I think that's both a compositional comment. In other words, there's layering in this, in the work in front of us right now, eco-spirituality, in terms of figure in the foreground, detailed patterning on the figure's clothing, and then the play of shadows in the background on the surface of on the side of the building. Really fascinating and really pleasing to the eye, and also it really draws the viewer in, both I think conceptually and also in terms of how is this made, kind of. I never think it's that. With my children, I'm always reminded of like the basic thing with art, which is, what are we looking at and how do we describe it? What are we seeing? What's happening? And I think that sometimes we forget about those basic questions. sometimes those basic questions are very, get you to the heart of the work. So I love all of that happening in your work. Maybe you just want to talk a little bit about this eco-spirituality before I go any further. And also just a reminder to the audience, please don't hesitate to type in your questions in the chat as we go. We will get to as many of them at the end of the program as we can. So go ahead, Taha, tell us more about eco-spirituality.
Okay, there's a lot there, but so I do shoot reference photos. So I'll go out, shoot some stuff and put things together sometimes, kind of collage it up and create pieces, or it could just be focusing on one individual person, a portrait. With eco-spirituality, that one is about one's connection with their environment. So it's like, is the environment a reflection of you, or are you a reflection of the environment? So that's where, like you'd seen the shadow in the back and the fatigue and these things. Right. It's kind of, they start mirroring each other, and it's going into layers of, is our community a reflection of us, our anger, our frustration, our fears, or are we a product of our community? Are we into something based off of the times, or the times reflection of us? So that was kind of the theme going into it. This one, with him, I tried to create a balance, and it's a being that is a part of it, a part of the community, and manifesting his environment, and also being a product of the environment, whether the product in the sense of or a reflection of the environment, like the trees, the leaves, and it's showing in the clothing, the facial tattoos, the metal work, and just different things of kind of his full surroundings. He is a part of that, and that is a part of him. So that was kind of the intention. And again, that's how I go about it, shooting, and I'll go and kind of set up, shoot some things, and then create the painting. So there's a concept there. I'll go out and try and, create that piece.
This is another beautiful painting, Divine Connection, which again, I think speaks to what your concept of the relationship between, people and their environment. Are the figures that you photograph or that you portray, are they real? Are they imagined? What's the relationship between you and the subjects in the works?
Generally, like, I come in contact with people. So it might be with Divine Connection, that's a friend, where I'm witnessing fatherhood. I'm a father as well of two, and a husband. But stepping outside of myself, seeing my environment, seeing my community, this was something I wanted to grasp, of that universal, that circle, the divine of father and child, whether female, whether male, but just that cycle and that presence. So it is about that being, but it's beyond the being. It's kind of just, it's a universal thing of father and child, and trying to focus on the simplest things of just touch. There's always things like going to the game or doing this, and just these kind of actions, but just the simplest of touches passes energy off. And so that's where the divine connection is father and child, but it's also this whole universal thing with whether the creator or energy or community, and just kind of everyone being a part of that. So that's kind of that's that
sure. It's great. In the last panel, I'm sorry, the one Metamorphosis, it's different from the other works in that it's not sort of set in a recognizable urban or a familiar sort of physical real world setting. It almost has a sort of ethereal or otherworldly sort of vibe. Can you just say a little bit more about this painting in relationship to the others?
Yeah, well, this one is specifically about, like, transformation, chrysalis, shedding of a skin, shedding of a perspective, a mind state, you know, social construct. So it's specific to where the other ones, again, it's about them a part of the community. This one's more internal. And so it's dealing with focusing with this specific being here. There's a lot of pressure and structure things on females, and especially young Black females, like noses and lips and hair and what's right and what's wrong. And so this was about shedding all those, you know, perspectives, shedding all that judgment, shedding all that, and going into the meta, the true love of self, going into the Buddhist. So it's metamorphosis, the transformation into self-acknowledgement, just understanding the divine. So they generally still move within this energy of kind of universal love and spirituality and things like that. But this one was more focused on, the young lady and shedding the chrysalis, the cocoon, and kind of evolving as the butterfly.
Great. Okay. Excellent. Maybe that'll give us something to think about. I'm thinking about what you said just now about sort of representations of the Black female in popular culture or in painting, thinking about what Tawny said at the beginning in terms of hair. And I'm hoping, Tawny, that you're listening and that maybe we can go back in the group chat part of this to talk a little bit further about that, just images of and notions of Black beauty, and how the Black body is represented in visual culture, particularly from the standpoint of the maker of those images, who controls the way Black bodies are represented and how they're represented, which I think is another amazing thing, which each of you are doing in your work in this exhibition, is putting forth a different view of the Black body than what most people are accustomed to seeing. And I think that's very important. I just wanted to get a little bit deeper on that in a minute. And Taha, we'll come back. My only question about this painting was, is it a self-portrait?
No, actually, this is the same gentleman that's in the eco-spirituality.
Ah, okay, great.
Sage, so yeah.
Okay, got it. And that person is a real person, but someone who to you represents fatherhood, manhood in some more universal way.
Yeah, so not fatherhood. Yes, he is a father, but he's not in the divine connection, the eco-spirituality, the one eco-spirituality community. And but yes, it's about energy, sage. So he being a sage, it could be looked at as a sage, wise energy, passing off that spirit, but then also burning the sage, which is cleansing the space. So it's putting out that energy of kind of like beings that I would like to kind of put out there to be represented. That it's clean energy, love of self, blessing each other, passing positive energy on. So putting out that vibration. So the piece is about vibration and cleansing, cleansing the spirits and all that kind of.
Great,
stuff.
Great. Okay, hold that thought, Taha. Hold those thoughts. So the third artist that we are featuring this evening, Justin Wadlington. Justin, good to see you again.
How you doing?
We had the pleasure of meeting at the show at the opening. Very happy about that. And I think, Justin, I wanted to, I think Tawny's work, she's showing us images of families, of mothers and daughters, of sort of the Black family today. I think Taha is also talking about, in terms of what he says about the relationship between individuals and their environment, Black fathers, the community. I think that's also it's sort of a larger extension of this theme of how we are representing Black life, Black bodies, the Black experience. And I think your work is also an interesting angle on that theme, which is sort of, for me, these are like hero portraits. these are heroes and heroes and heroism, and the way that you paint them also lends to that. Tawny adds gold leaf to her photographs, which is beautiful, and the point she made about how gold throughout culture has always been associated with elevated figures, kings, the divine. And you also, with the beautiful, I'm just looking first, and I remember seeing this in person, the frame that you I frequently use for your paintings are very elaborate, beautiful frames, which, a frame literally is what holds the painting, but it's also a frame of reference for the audience. It also tells us or gives us a clue as to how we should be perceiving the work and what the meaning of the work is. Before I was working as an educator and a patron, I was working at MTV. And so thankfully I knew a little bit about the legends here that in this beautiful painting, the apotheosis of legends, and about death sort of happening in different ways. It was funny because at MTV is where I got to work on shows that had to do with sort of social issues and education and politics. I worked on the PBS part of MTV, and also documentaries and news. And one of the projects that I worked on was a series of reports on the then unsolved murder of Jam Master Jay. So I think that was an early introduction for me of hip hop culture. I think, hip hop culture is something which is familiar to many people. What struck me so much about your work, and this painting in particular, is that you're taking these, again, these are, in my view, heroes, legendary figures, and you're sort of taking them out of the context that much of the culture, the general culture, sees them in, and elevating them. I can say elevating, but I should really leave that to you to explain how you are changing them by the way you portray these figures. I think that's very interesting, and I feel like it's part of the story here, which each of you is telling in terms of how we represent the Black experience. So Justin, with that quick introduction, do you want to say a little bit more about sort of how you go about, why you choose the figures that you choose, and what you do to re-render them in a way that people recognize, but that is also new and different and challenging, perhaps?
Yes. First of all, thank you to everybody that was involved in this panel. It's an honor to be here. I'm really happy to be here. So I wanted to say that first of all. To answer your question, you're right about painting to portray elevation within a certain image of people in the Black culture, I guess you would say. When I was younger, I used to always walk into museums and things like that, and be fascinated with all the paintings of like heroes and events from the early times, like before there were cameras. And rarely do you ever see African Americans in these pictures. And I'm looking like, I'm growing up, and you guys were talking about like fatherhood, and my dad actually passed away when I was 2. So like it wasn't even somebody like that I could look up to when I was younger. So when I would go out and I would look around, the closest thing to me were, of course, uncles or people out on the street or hip hop artists or anything like that. And that's kind of what I attached to, So as I got older, just in my head, I always said that one day, like, I want to be able to paint something like that, like looking in those museums. I said, one day I'm going to be able to paint something like that, but this time I'm going to represent it with people that I see all the time, growing up. So that's a major factor in why I choose all of these icons and people like that. It's because they resonated me. They were, in some instances, father figures to me and things like that. So yeah. I could explain a little bit about the apotheosis. Apotheosis actually means to ascend to a higher elevated level. So although those guys who were fathers who passed away early, they left a mark on entire culture. Like Eazy-E from Nipsey, that's about 3 generations worth of artists in one painting. So it's like from the 80s to the 2000s, people can look at that painting and see a moment somewhere in there. You know what I mean? And I wanted to portray those guys, even though they all passed away, even though they were murdered, you know, I wanted to leave the image of them as if they were still alive and they were still somewhere full of life, full of color, and just at a elevated level. So that explains that.
That's great. Can you just keep that thought hold on to that thought, go to the next painting, the one after this one, actually, in terms of what you're saying. Yes, which is really great because it's, it's a painting of a painting. It's an artist's, you're an artist's artist, I see. And we can all look and recognize our own artistic heroes there with Jean-Michel Basquiat. I see Simone Lee, who is representing the United States, the next Venice Biennale.
Yeah.
Got to give it up for Simone. That's amazing. And yeah, can you just say a little bit more about this painting? There's a lot going on, and I'm curious to know what you were thinking when you made this.
Yeah, this one's called it's actually called Bad. So it's like a lot of things that I do are like metaphorical. I don't want everything to be just right out straight, you know what I mean? I wanted to have a deeper meaning behind it. So when you look at the word bad, it has many meanings, but it actually stands for Black American Dream. And, I grew up listening to Jay-Z forever. So he became a big inspiration to me. Just always kept me motivated when I saw his work ethic over the years. It just was like every single year since he first was introduced to hip hop, he dropped a great album. It wasn't just like he got, super successful and then fell off. He was like always at the top of his game and still is. And, I learned Basquiat through Jay-Z. Like I learned who he was through Jay-Z. I learned a lot about, it made me appreciate what I was doing even more with the art, seeing like a guy that I look up to, bragging about art on his walls and things like that. So I wanted to make this painting to symbolize a lot of Black artists, such as Basquiat, such as Jay-Z. I have like Beyonce on the Nike statue that's in the Louvre. I have her face on there. And then there's like even like a family aspect that's hidden in there because the leaves represent Blue Ivy, which is the daughter. The helmet represents like Sir, which is their son. And then even Rumi is there with a quote from the poet Rumi, and that's another one of their kids. So it's just this like melting pot of all these like metaphorical things and homage to a lot of Black artists that I grew up with.
That's great. That's great, Justin. I wondered whether like now it would be wonderful to hear, just as you've been watching Tawny and Taha, and we can continue looking at some more paintings by Justin, which I see are referencing art history and also, Black representation of Black bodies. Tawny, do you have any questions based on sort of what we've been talking about? I know we started with you and we started talking about family and photo, the move from photography to, as you say, messages, which I think is such a beautiful way to think about your work. Anything that we've said since we started talking that you sort of want to comment on, or maybe you have a question for Justin or Taha based on their work?
I have a question. I'm more so because I too use gold frames, so I'm I'm looking at his frames and wondering where you got some of them, but I don't know.
I'll let you know. ABO art. That's where I get on.
I don't necessarily have any questions that I can think of right now.
I'm looking behind you. I just realized now that you're full screen, I can see the gold frame.
frames take everything up a whole nother level. Like just once again, growing up in the museums, and I was like, man, when I can afford it, I'm going to start getting frames for my artwork. And
I agree with you that one thing that I do is I source frames also from, some of them are contemporary and some of them are antique. So I also source them from private sellers and things like that. But one thing that I've noticed is that sellers place a lot of value on the frame. One woman, she told me, be careful with that, you know, don't handle it. And this is what I'm saying through my work, you know, the world values things more than they're valuing the lives of the people that I'm placing in the work. So I love the frames that you use, of course. So that was my main comment on that.
It definitely takes like me and my guy who helps me pick the frames. It's definitely like research and like, you know, a whole thing behind it. So yeah, I appreciate you noticing that. Thank you.
That's great. Taha, what do you think this is an interesting conversation about frames, which I wasn't expecting, but it's really great because you know, it's easy not to think about the frame, and you guys are, you know, Tawny and Justin are sort of making us think about the frame and what it can add to a work of art. Taha, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, like I'm all in. So my background prior was a builder. So I'm a carpenter. So I build panels. So I'm painting on panels. I'll build them, but I also would build my frames. So I got up to go grab, because I got some gold frames over there.
All right.
So, but then it goes back to talking about gold earlier. We're talking about, you can go back to like Mensa Musa, you can go back to Timbuktu, you can talk about gold, and you can talk about that, which, you know, people of the sun, gold. And so I'm all for the gold aspect and with the framing. And I've done wallpaper frames. I'm like a wallpaper guy. So it's like bringing that, it's just another element that you can kind of take the piece up or add it, just another element, a little kind of.
And it doesn't always have to be gold either. It can be whatever. Yeah.
That's where I'm saying, like the wallpaper I've done, you know, walnut frames, so on and so forth, but just to add to the gold. I'm like, I find in this conversation and amongst community, there's a lot of similarities just in representation, showing that regal, that class, that culture that has always existed, combining whether it's photo and paint and this, which breaks down to like jazz or things where it's taking certain things and creating something. So I find in what my fellow artists here, it's kind of pulling, and that's that hip hop, the modern day, you know, taking a little this, taking a little that, adding this, adding that. So I kind of find in these conversations to find that similarity, that everyone wants to show what people have been, and give a visual to that, which it's been highlighted by only generally a certain community, and it's just a lot of people have always been a part of it, but it's just kind of, people are starting to peep what's happening, you know.
You can't hide it no more. I feel like it was like almost seemingly like it was hidden for a long time, because I'm like, ain't no way Black African American artists just started getting like this good. Like I feel like it's always been that way, but everywhere you look, you don't really see that. So I'm glad that the internet and social media and things like that allowed, you know, somebody that might not be able to afford to get into a gallery to post all their artwork on their page, and get somebody from, you know, a different environment or whatever like that to see that work. So I definitely, I'm happy for the times that we're in, because it's definitely opening the doors and giving opportunities to a lot of people who might have been like lost in history without like this technology. So hooray for the future.
To add one thing is, like, you know, when we look at sculpture, you look at painting, we generally go to like Europe. You know, I'm a huge fan of Caravaggio. That's what got me painting. Just like, I was like, man, I love that war, that, you know, and even his story, dude was hardcore, you know. But we want to talk about sculpture, let's learn about let's go to the ancient Egyptians. We can talk about sculpture and realism. That was there. We can go to Western Africa. We can talk about abstract and just creation and connection. So it's been there, but it was looked at, we just tend to talk about just the European perspective, yet Greeks and Romans who were learning from, what was going on in Africa. So it's kind of claiming, and again, not running to people to go kind of give us a light, come on, help it, let us get in the game. It's just like, forget it, let's own it, let's represent it, let's build our community.
Yeah.
Let's just be our representation. Let's just keep it together. And that's, I think, technology is definitely allowed to kind of jump over the key holders to some extent, and let people know what again has been going on since the jump.
Most definitely. And to add to that, and to also add to something that Justin mentioned, on top of the frustrations of everything happening in the world, I began to notice with my children, taking them to museums, you don't see yourselves, they're not seeing themselves. And that is very important. It's very important for us to see ourselves in these big gold frames and this massive, way. And so I found myself complaining and crying and being very frustrated about it. And so that's also a big thing that catapulted me into creating more of what I wanted to see. There are millions of amazing Black artists in the world. But for me, I more so was feeling, what are you doing to contribute to the world that you want your children to grow up in? What are you doing to contribute to creating these things that you want them to see in other Black children? Because this was it's very important, basically to speak the truth. These things are true that we're saying, and we've been placed in the background. And growing up in Western culture, that's just what has happened. We weren't able to see ourselves in this way. And so we're all playing our own role in shifting the narrative even more, and creating what we want to see. And that's what I'm finding here.
It's definitely powerful. I agree once again, because when I actually gave up on art for 6 years back in like right after I did like a semester at a community college, and then after that I kind of like gave up. But kind of a lot of tragic things happened or whatever. But one day, 6 years, 7 years later, I said, you know what? Like you said, I said, what am I going to do? Like, I'm kind of walking around, like feeling miserable about myself. And I was like, you know what? I think that art, like, I felt like it calling me. Get back into art. And one of the things that really, really helped me was, like I said, again, social media. Somebody actually on Facebook sent me a link to a Black artist out in London. You might have heard of him, like Kelvin Okafor. And at this time, I sent him a message like, hey, how'd you draw? Because I was like, at first I saw these drawings. I'm like, there's no way a person did this. Like, it's so good. And that like made me automatically energized, like that I could actually take it my own self up to another level. And he actually like replied to me and gave me some pointers and things like that. So the power in art, and just like you said, representation, seeing somebody that like you, it really, I can vouch for that, like 100%, that it can change somebody's trajectory in their life for sure.
Yeah.
Just a quick little thing. You can look at the opposite of that, and you could say, seeing people slinging, people fighting, people shooting, people killing, and that representation can also lead people that way as well. So, when you look at media and you look at these things, sometimes people can strategically try and set that up.
Exactly.
But just, again, the balance of like seeing, say, the president, Obama, whether people believe in his politics or not, but some young man, some young boy, some young woman seeing that, all of a sudden they could get there. So that's the importance of the visual. Of course, the spirit, the energy is very important, but the visual is very important just to see yourself in those positions. You see a doctor, you see a teacher, you see a professor. Those things lead and help energize.
Exactly.
So I think, again, we're all in that thing. I never seen anything in high school. I never seen anything. I never seen anyone unless they were a slave or any, So it took us whatever we all found our way through it to kind of be inspired, and we all have our little stories. But now you can add, and we have kids, and the community learns to do entertainment as well. And so now some young kid that's coming up that's 8 years old doesn't even know that. They just know I can do whatever I want because they've seen it.
Right.
Yeah.
It's normal to them, so that's very powerful.
Right.
As I suspected, this is such a great conversation. I'm not stopping it now. You guys are touching on so many interesting things. And I want to pass it over to David, who's just going to throw a couple questions that we've gotten from the audience that have been listening. Just one quick comment, because Stephanie mentioned this at the outset. The three of you talking just now about such an important issue, which is and this touches on what I do as a patron, which is trying to break down some of the barriers that have prevented, young people, especially, from seeing museums and from going to museums, from seeing themselves in museums, not only on the art on the walls, but the people who work at museums. That's part of a larger conversation happening now. And I think it's so important that you as artists are showing the way that, I didn't grow up looking at art. My parents didn't take me to museums. I sort of had to learn to do that. And, you all too are sort of each in your own way talking about following your passion and following what you believe in and making pictures of the way your lives are, but also the way that life ought to be. I think you're reflecting back to the Black community and to the world at large, ways of living and seeing that don't get shown enough. And I think you're inspiring without even necessarily realizing it, that you're doing that. And on top of it, getting back to what Stephanie said, you're doing this from the standpoint of being a self-taught artist. There was the painting that I think it was that Justin showed that had Basquiat in the background, Bad, Black American Dreams. I think, the Basquiat was a self-taught artist. Thornton Dial was a self-taught artist. Many are just off the top of my own head. The path of the self-taught artist is that much harder. But I think you guys are showing us a way to reach the walls of museums, to reach the viewers, to have an impact through, in spite of the fact that you didn't follow the normal channels through your journey in the art world so far, which I think to each of you is really just beginning. So let me just, with that, I want to toss it to David, who I think wants to relay some of the questions in the chat. Is that okay, David?
Absolutely. In fact, that was a perfect segue because one of the first questions was, can you tell us how you got started as artists? Bernard just talked about the self-taught aspect, but take us down that journey a little more. Tawny.
Is this for anybody?
Starting with me? Okay. My mom will tell you I've just always been a creator, and I've always just created. But I thought I would be an actress. I went to the National Conservatory of Dramatic Arts, and I quit maybe within 2 months or so. I don't know what happened. My whole life I thought I would be an actress, and I just lost interest in it. Didn't continue it. At that point, had to figure out, what am I going to do now? How am I going to make money? And so my boyfriend at the time, suggested, since I always loved creating and things like that, to try out photography. And I have not put the camera down since. And so in the beginning, I just kind of was shooting whatever, just using it as a way to make money. And I had my son when I was 25, and instantly changed to shooting kids. It was amazing fun. I'm trying to rush so that I know that we have. And so after photographing him, other people wanted me to photograph their children. From that, I got commercial jobs. And a very big pivotal point for me was, photographing my father and his battle with cancer, prostate cancer. That pretty much changed everything for me and what I wanted to do with my camera. And those brought about those questions. What am I doing? You know, you realize you only have a certain amount of time left here in the world. I probably only have 40 years left for me, maybe 50. And so I just kind of let go of shooting for monetary gain and just started to focus on things that were important to me, that were that contributed, as I said, to the world that I wanted my children to grow up in. And so I just kind of started just putting my frustration into my work, and my love and sadness and all of those things. I just started putting them into my work, shared it. And I think I was trying to heal myself, didn't realize at the time that it was also healing for other people.
Yeah.
And so it just kind of was just this natural, organic thing that happened. And I've been focusing on that ever since.
I think that journey is so evident in your work. And
Yeah.
I love that about it. I also think that the best work is always highly personal and universal at the same time.
Yeah.
Your work is really doing that. Taha, tell us about your journey into it.
I was a sports guy. My siblings and I, we were all sports. That's what it was. But I think it was just more energy, just energy out there. School, the structure didn't really work. It's just expression. And maybe if we had known at that age, we could have been into more performing arts or into something at that age, but it was just sports. And then I stopped doing it in school, high school. And then, you just go the way, your community, your people. And then I left the school my senior year, and I went to a different school, and I had to sign up for classes. And I was like, oh, art, I remember I used to like art. And I got into it. And then basically I started in my 20s. It was like something after work I would doodle and stuff. And then I was like, okay, let's set a vision. And I talked to a friend that graduated from an academy and a college. And then I was like, okay, this is how you can create. And so I got into it and just really started focusing on it. My brothers did as well. My other brother's a leather worker, creates bags and just art with that. My other brother does sculpture, but we all started in our 20s in within the same year. So it just kind of went from sports into art. So we were always into sound and into jazz and into all that stuff. It was just part of our culture. But it just kind of went through, and we're so passionate. And I just have so much stuff that you want to, express. And so it just went in that way. And again, I work with my hands and stuff. I'm a builder as well. So it's just that kind of creation, and really just started pushing it and moved from Toronto to New York, just let's go for it. And just jumped in, and it's kind of evolved, and, all that stuff. My wife's an artist. It just kind of found me, or,
Yeah.
chisel away at it. So
It sounds like you were lucky because you had the artist community even in your family, which is incredible. And I have to say, on the sports thing, that's not the usual connection for the artists, but the New York Academy of Art manages to field its own soccer team. I feel like the art school that actually has an athletic team on the side.
Nice. Wonderful.
There you go. Justin, tell us about your journey.
Man, so it's kind of cool to hear everybody say something similar, which is that it seems like it almost was in them already, genetically. It's so interesting because my mom, I was raised by my grandmom, so my mom is an issue with her, but all my life they were saying your mom was an artist, your mom was an artist. So I'm just like, really? So that explains why when I was a kid, just looking at cartoons, I would just want to draw a Ninja Turtle 100 times on anything, on the walls, with anything, you know what I mean? Get a little spanking after that, but anywhere there was anywhere there was something for me to draw, it was just it was calling me to do it. And I always just kind of, it was nobody taught me. It was I remember looking at a Ninja Turtles movie, and Ninja Turtles is kind of the reason why it took me on this journey. But it was like a scene where April was drawing one of the Ninja Turtles, and I'm like 5, looking like, wow, like that's amazing that people can draw like this. So I would get a piece of paper and a pen and try to draw it. And then ever since then, in school, I would try to compete with people on who could draw the best Ninja Turtle and things like that. It was just like that culture back in the day of just like competing with each other. But it was friendly competition. Sometimes it turned serious, but that just, I don't know, that just shows me that there was something in me the whole time that kind of, like when you hear the word self-taught, it's like not only teaching yourself how to draw, but like yourself is like learning all of these things and like transforming. And that's how I felt like I was doing over the years, just like evolving and transforming. And I don't know how or where, it just seems always like things were like calling me into becoming like what I'm doing now. And I'm just going with the flow. I'm going with the destiny of it all.
Love that.
Yeah.
And I love the practical advice there for the audience. If you ever need inspiration, go straight to the Ninja Turtle movies.
What?
Love everything.
Yeah, go right there.
That's where I'm going next time I start a painting.
Yeah.
And okay,
Ooh.
Connie, here's another one for you. You were talking a little bit about the emotions, bring your children to museums and stuff in these times. Can you guys address the emotions that have been a part of the COVID like reality in terms of making art, seeing art, being in the art world, how that's affected you?
I want to make sure I understand your question. Can you ask it again?
Yeah, you're saying, what other emotions, and this is the question specifically, what other emotions have been a part of the COVID exhibition reality for you? Like, have you been able to show as much? Have you gone out less? Have you seen less? Just anything that comes up from how that has changed your artistic life.
Yeah, it's been challenging. It's been different. I will say it's hard for me usually to speak. I don't know why that happened with age. So it's usually hard for me to sit on panels. So I am enjoying being on Zoom because it's a lot easier.
It's your frustrated actress thing coming out. Here you go.
I don't know what happened, but so I am enjoying that part of it. Yeah, it's different not being able to experience. I wasn't able to make it to this exhibition. My daughter has asthma. My mom lives with us as well, and she has a lung issue as well. So I haven't been really going out. And so it's been very different to seeing art in person is so much more amazing than having to view it online. So to me, that's been challenging, not really to being able to take that in and being able to fully experience the overwhelming feeling of exhibitions. I'm always overwhelmed by the work when I'm viewing it. And so that's, for me, been the challenge of that.
Yeah. What about you, Taha?
I feel just with the times and how everything kind of happened, and again, being in New York and the whole thing just boom and everything shut down and everyone tripping, and there's the positive and negative. The positive was definitely like I was able to streamline my thoughts. So it wasn't like, you didn't get this done because you quit or you didn't do the right thing. It was like, this is shut down, calm down, let it be. Let it be, it's happened, it is what it is. So I spent a lot of quality time with my kids, and it was just kids, it was just energy with that. And then I was able to get a lot of artwork done. I painted at home, the studio at home, and just kept it kind of this bubble of just clean energy, trying to keep that going, keep the health up, keep all that. Now with that said, I know there's a whole nother side to it. which whether it's friends or family, and just the environment that I was in was very kind of fragile and very, you know, sick and just dark and that. So it was maneuvering within that, but keeping the base clean and healthy and keep the mind fresh, keeping the mind right. And I was able to go out to the show. I went with the family. We went out there, and it was one of those things of connecting with the family more. Even though we were always still very connected, but it was, my daughter learned how to ride a bike, roller skate. It was like just me and her, or my kids, my wife, and then, so I used it more as like a cleansing time, and just put the energy into the art, and then put the energy into the family, and everything else, I can't change it. This is New York. It's going to exist around you, and just don't even try and keep up, but listen, and don't like be naive and not, you know, ignorant to whatever. But so I definitely took it as definitely you know, build that shield, that force field of just health and energy, and just kind of went at it. And there's ups and downs, don't get me wrong, but that's the main mindset, was just like, you know, keep moving.
Just the sage shield, right, Taha?
Yo,
I'm thinking of, I'm gonna get some sage.
Justin, you weigh in here.
Yeah.
Hey, could you repeat the question one more time, just so I
Just
can?
about how like the COVID situation affected you and your kind of, you know, journey in the art world. Like, were you going out as much, seeing exhibitions as much? Were you, you know, staying in? Like, how did that all work for you?
It's so crazy, because the end of 2019, I was embarking on that self-portrait that they showed, I believe, and that happened around like November. So I was already like planning on taking a few months of self-quarantining to finish this painting, and this was late 2019. So, you know, I'm painting it, and February came around, I'm almost done, and I believe this, you know, Kobe Bryant had passed, and then it was just like the year didn't quite start off like how everybody expected it to start off. You know, in 2019, everybody's like, 2020 is my year, all of this, and so it started off bad. And then I'm painting this thing, I'm in a house, and basically March came and I'm almost finished, and this is when the whole COVID thing started to get real serious, and I'm just like what's going on? And the crazy part as well is that these guys are like filming a documentary on like my story or whatever you want to say, and that happened right when the shutdown happened. So we're like, what's going on here? Like, is the world about to end? Like, you know, I'm just finishing this painting. I was planning on having like an art show and all of this, and the world got locked down. So like at first I was self-quarantining on purpose, and then now I'm in the house, not by my own choice. And that kind of like made me feel funny. You know what I mean? It's like, I was already slaving away basically with this painting, and I couldn't wait to get out. But I used that time to say, like, what happens if the world doesn't end, and, things like that. So I just decided to paint another painting along that time, and still do it. I guess you would say I used it wisely. And I would say, like, amongst the Black urban community, I said this before, I believe that we've been in a pandemic for forever. It seems like left and right, people are getting killed on camera, being treated unjust and things like that. So we already have a high stress level as it is in any year. So it's almost like that kind of made a lot of people not freak out as much as the whole world freaked out.
Yeah.
And, so basically, I guess I'll say as much as it is a tragic year, just being prepared from all the times I sat in front of paintings and things like that, it almost seemed like I've seen all this before already. It's strange.
Bernard, will you answer that question too? Because you actually wrote an essay basically about for the show. And maybe that's the way to wrap this up. It's a perfect ending, and we are over time, which I have totally not minded at all because this conversation has been so incredibly great. And by the way, I just want to say I'm so glad it's been recorded because I want the whole world to see it. I really do. So Bernard, bring us home here and tell us about what you were talking about in your essay, which really addresses this question.
Sure. No, first again, thanks to each of you. Now I just want to meet you in person and look at more of your work and talk about the work live. And I hope we can get to that. So I hope this conversation is just the beginning. And I appreciate, sort of the journey that each of you has taken us through tonight, in the work. And I referenced already in terms of how you are sort of just by being here, by being present, by showing up, by sharing, you're sort of showing to our audience and to whoever else will see this after this evening that there is a way to have a voice and a vision in the art world and to have an impact. I really hope that you take that away from this conversation. And David and I can talk more about that with you guys afterward. What Justin was saying now was so interesting. I was smiling because, it's true that for many artists, social distancing is kind of a way of life. Artists are trained to be in their studio, to make work, to, somewhat lead solitary lives. And, I think not every artist has to do that, but Justin, the sort of paradigm that you set up at the end of 2019, you were on lockdown, finishing a painting, and then you went into a different kind of lockdown, from voluntary lockdown to involuntary lockdown. What I wrote about for the exhibition was my conversations with artists and sort of the journey in my conversations with artists from the beginning of the pandemic until the George Floyd induced protests. I think that, early on, my conversations were focused mostly with artists who were in their studios, like you, Justin, making work. The pandemic was, made it safer to be in your studio. It was the civic thing to do. It was positivity for creative art making, being alone, being separated, being isolated, thinking about, being in a room where you're just your own voice and your own vision. And then an interesting thing happened in my conversations with artists on May 25th, which was when George Floyd began to sort of knock on the studio walls, or the response to what happened with George Floyd. And sort of, not that it was the first time that these voices and these protests were happening. It was just the first time that I think, a bigger part of the country and the world took notice and participated. And so there was a shift in my conversations with artists from, what are you making inside the studio? What are you thinking of? What are your thoughts in terms of how your work fits into the greater evolution of the work that you've made in the past and where you see it going in the future? There was a distinct shift from that to conversations about how can I get outside of my studio? How can I engage with other people? How can I connect with my fellow artists? How can I have a voice that goes beyond the painting or the sculpture or the photograph that I'm working on, and that touches on the issues that are bringing people into the streets? And I thought for me, as a father, again, fatherhood is something we talked about tonight, and parenthood for each of us, I think, is something which informs our work, whether you're an artist or a patron. I think that, I took the example of the artists that I was speaking with, like you three tonight, and I realized that I had an opportunity here to teach my own children, a very real-time civics lesson. And so I took them out and we went to some family-friendly marches. And it was one of my first sort of re-engagements with the world after the pandemic. I think for me, it was really, another example of the ways in which, we need to listen to artists, even when it's painful, even when the work, it makes us feel uncomfortable, even when the work is showing us things that we feel shame about, or we feel anger about, or we feel pain about, that I think, each of you, Justin, Tawny, and Taha, are sort of bravely sort of paving the way for generations that will come after you, and for lessons that will be taught, that you are passing down, that will be learned and will be valuable. So that the next time there's another pandemic, and as Justin, you said so correctly, this was not the first pandemic. There have been other pandemics, and there will be other pandemics. And I feel that what you've done tonight is sort of remind us that we can have strength even in adversity, and you can have a voice even when you don't have an exhibition or a show or an outlet for the voice and we normally expect in the art world. So thank you for inspiring me. Thank you. I'm sure people listening on, watching, listening tonight will take some of this away. And yeah, those are my last.
Perfect. It's a perfect note to end it on.
Yeah.
And thank you to the audience for staying with us, and Tawny, Justin, Taha. This was great. Thank you so much, Bernard. Stephanie, I'll see you soon. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Until next time.
Until next time.